I want to ask you a question, perhaps the most fundamental question a human being can ask. Is it possible ever to be free of the self centered activity that defines our entire lives? Is there such a thing as a real self, something permanent and true, apart from the myriad images, the fortress of memories and demands that we have so carefully constructed? This is not an abstract theological puzzle. It is a question of profound practical importance because it concerns our daily sorrow, our conflict, and our desperate search for security. So let us look at it together, not as a philosopher and an audience, but as two human beings exploring a map of our own consciousness. What is this self, this me, this ego, this center from which we think, we feel, and we act? If I were to ask you to describe it, what would you say? You would likely begin, as I would, by listing your attributes, your sensations, your feelings, your romantic aspirations, your demands, and your possessions. You would say, the self is my body, my thoughts, my house, my partner, my family. You would identify it with your achievements, your job title, your struggles, your deep seated ambitions, and also your virtues and your qualities. It would be the sum total of your joys and your unhappily, your aspirations for the divine, and your most secret earthly longings. It is this powerful, insistent center, this me, that declares my house, my family, my children, my bank account, my country, my belief. It is the impulse that says, I must do this. I am compelled to go and find truth. I must be successful, or I must renounce the world. This surely is the verbal description of the self we all know. But it's so much more than just a verbal description, isn't it? It is a deep, visceral feeling. It is the very mechanism that creates the me and the you, the we and the they. This is the root of it all. Within this sense of me is contained everything, our nationality, our family tradition, the name we carry, the particular form of our body, our intellectual capacities, our desire for more clarity, more power, or more love. From this singular center, all our action takes place. Every one of our aspirations, our ambitions, our bitter quarrels, our disagreements, our cherished opinions, our judgments, and all our accumulated experience, it is all centered in this me. And this isn't just the conscious self, the person we present to the world, the face we put on for our job or our family. It is also the deep inner consciousness, the hidden currents, the motives and fears that are not obvious, not open, but which direct our lives from the shadows. All this, the entire field of consciousness at every level, all of this is the me. Now, the questioner asks, is it possible to be free of this center? And I must ask you, why would anyone want to be free of it? Have you ever considered that? Is it not because we have observed, perhaps only in a flash, that this center is the very cause of division? The moment I have me and my belief, my God, my country, I have, in that same breath, created your belief, your God, and your country. I have drawn a line in the sand. And where there is division of any kind, there must be conflict. This is not a complex theory, it is a brutal, observable fact of our existence. When this me is the active element operating all the time, the same me in you as it is in me, just wearing a different name, a different skin color, holding a different job, possessing a different position in the hierarchical social structure, it is still the same entity. Whether you are Lord so and so, another is your servant. It is the me dividing itself, categorizing itself socially, economically, and religiously. This is surely clear, and one realizes, if one looks at the world at all, that this division has brought about unimaginable agony. The Hindu and the Muslim, the Jew and the Arab, the American and the Russian, the blue and the red. This has filled the world with wars, with brutality, with relentless violence, because the self has identified itself with an idea, a flag, a territory, or an ideal, whether noble or igni. It fights for that ideal, but it is still at its core an ego trip. I see this in so many forms. I see those who, dissatisfied with the materialism of their lives, decide to find spirituality. I don't know why, but they often go elsewhere, perhaps to India, as the old cliche goes, or now perhaps they go to an expensive retreat or follow a dozen gurus online. They put on a different fancy dress, a different set of beliefs. They change their diet, they change their vocabulary, and they say, I'm finding spiritual things. But have they only changed the outer garb, the clothes, while the essential me is operating just as it always has? It is still struggling, still endeavoring, still grasping for an experience, still denying another, deeply attached to its new opinions, its new longings, its new identity as a spiritual person. This me is the essence of all our trouble, and we must admit the essence of all our fleeting pleasures, all our fears, and all our sorrows. So the mind, seeing this chaos, says, how am I to get rid of this center? So seeing this whole structure, this prison that I call me, the mind naturally, instinctively asks, is it possible to be free of it? And I must ask you to look very, very closely at what happens when we pose this question. Because the moment we do, we engage in a new kind of effort. We say, I must be free, I must be unselfish, I must dissolve my ego. But please, listen to this. This is the very crux of the matter. The more effort you make to be free of this center, the more that very effort strengthens the self you are trying to escape. Have you not noticed this? The me that says I must be free is the very same me that is the prison. It is the self that is making an effort to be free of itself, and therefore it remains hopelessly involved in its own activity, merely imagining that it will one day be free, imagining it will achieve some future state of enlightenment or peace. This is the great trap of the spiritual seeker, the religious person, the ambitious idealist. It is the same mechanism as those who go off into various kinds of meditation, trying to impose a system, a control, a discipline upon the mind. They are trying to achieve stillness, to gain silence. And when they have a moment of it, the me instantly captures that experience, identifies with it, and says, I have achieved it, I am peaceful, I am advancing. But this is still the center. In fact, it is a stronger center, a more righteous, more self assured, and therefore more subtle and dangerous center. It has simply added spirituality or enlightenment to its list of possessions, just like it possesses a house or a reputation. You see this everywhere in our modern world of wellness and self help. The ego, feeling insecure, now makes a tremendous effort to optimize itself, to hack its own biology, to become a better version of itself. It is still the movement from the center decorating its own cage. So, please, the first thing to realize, if we are to explore this at all, is that to understand whether it is possible to be free, there must be no effort. And I know what the mind immediately says to that. It says, no effort. That means I can just do what I like. I can be lazy, indulgent, and cruel, but doing what one likes is, of course, still the movement of the self, isn't it? It is the self indulging its own impulses, its own desires, its own habits. Whether you put on the yellow robe of a monk, or the purple robe of a king, or the jeans and t-shirt of a rebel, it is the self still, identified with an ideal, the ideal of renunciation, the ideal of power, or the ideal of freedom, and pursuing that ideal through great effort or great indulgence. The movement, in either case, is from the center. I wonder if this is clear. We are caught in a perfect trap. To make an effort strengthens the me, and to make no effort in the sense of doing what I like also strengthens the me. So, what is one to do? Before we can even answer that, we must look at the other question that was asked, which perhaps is the root of this entire trap. The questioner asks, is there a real self apart from the self created by thought with its images? This is the great hope of mankind, isn't it? That behind this petty, fearful, striving me, there is a real self, a higher self, a sublime, supreme, eternal principle. The Hindus have posited this for millennia. They call it the Atman, the highest principle which is the true self. And in the West, we have imagined it as the soul, as a spark of the divine. I am sure most of us feel, or at least hope, that there is something else beyond this anxious, fleeting me with its quarrels and its pleasures. But look at what has happened. The moment we use the word self to describe it, the higher self, the real self, or use any word to describe that which we imagine is beyond the me, we have already reduced it to the familiar. It is still the self. Thought, which is the me, which is the past, which is memory, has created this higher self as a form of security, as an escape from the lower self. It has projected an ideal, a permanent, beautiful thing in opposition to the ugly, contradictory, actual thing. But it is still a creation of thought. Thought has created God. Thought has created the higher self. Thought has created heaven as an escape from the suffering which thought itself has created through the me. It is a me playing a game with itself, dividing itself into high and low to perpetuate its own movement of becoming. So, the first thing to realize is the utter futility of this search. The me cannot find something that is not me. So, Is it possible to be free of the self? Not to become a higher self, but to be free of the entire structure, without becoming a vegetable, without becoming absent-minded or vaguely lunatic. What does this freedom even mean? Let's make it concrete. Let's look at what the self is. The self is, as we said, a bundle of memories, experiences, and qualities. And one of the primary qualities, one of the main attributes of this self is attachment. Isn't that right? I am attached to my reputation, what you think of me. I am attached to my name, to my family. I am attached to my experiences, to the pleasures I have had and want to repeat. I am attached to my knowledge, to what I have said, to my opinions, to my conclusions. This is the very substance of the me. So the question, is it possible to be free of the self, is the same as asking, is it possible to be free from all attachment? Now, let's work this out, sirs. Let's look at it seriously. If you really want to be free of the self, it means no attachment. And again, the mind immediately recoils. It says, if I am not attached, I will become detached, indifferent, callous. I will shut myself away. But that, of course, is just another form of the self, isn't it? Before it was attached, now in its effort to be detached, it is still the me controlling, resisting, building a wall. It is the same movement in reverse. So we must be very clear that this movement from attachment to so-called detachment is a trick of the mind. It is the self escaping from one pattern into another, building a new, more subtle, and perhaps more lonely fortress, calling it indifference, and feeling very righteous about it. But the world is divided tragically, brutally so, because this me is the very principle of division. It is the me and the you, the we and the they. It is my group against your group, my country against your country, my truth against your truth. This is not an abstraction. It is the daily news. It is the cause of all our wars, our political hatred, and our intimate personal suffering. So the question, is it possible to be free of the self, is the most urgent question one can ask, because the may is the source of all this misery. And to answer it, we must be willing to be free of all attachments, not just the ones we find inconvenient. Can you be free from attachment to your wife, to your husband, to your children? This doesn't mean you abandon them or cease to care for them, on the contrary. But can you stop seeing them as yours, as extensions of your me, as sources of your security, your pleasure, your identity? When I am attached, I am not in relationship. I am in a state of possession. And therefore I am in a constant state of fear, fear of loss, fear of betrayal, which creates jealousy and sorrow. That is not love. And what about your name, your reputation? In our modern world, this is perhaps the greatest attachment of all. We call it our personal brand, the carefully curated image we project on social media, the professional status we have struggled for, the followers we have accumulated. We are terrified of this name being damaged, and so we live in a state of constant anxious defense, polishing this image. Can one be free of this? To be inwardly, psychologically, nothing. Can you be unattached to your country, your flag, your nationality? Not to be against it, which is just another form of attachment, but to see it for what it is, a geographical and ideological boundary drawn by thought, which has separated you from other human beings. Can you be free of attachment to your God, to your belief, to your Savior, or to your atheism? Because the me is that belief. It identifies with the ideal and feels secure in it and will therefore kill or be killed for that belief. It is the same me. And as the questioner pointedly noted, you can't very well be detached from your bank account if you have one. The bank profits from it. But can you be free of the psychological identification with it to have money or not to have it, and not let it define the me? You see, to be deeply, fundamentally not attached to anything, your country, your God, your family as a possession, your name, your ideals, your opinions, your experiences. Your very knowledge is not to be cold or indifferent. It is the very opposite. When you are really deeply, basically not attached, then from that immense emptiness, from that deep sense of no identification, comes a totally different quality. Then a sense of responsibility arises. But it is not my responsibility to my wife or to my children or to my country, which is just another form of exclusive, divisive attachment. It is rather a total sense of responsibility for the whole. It is the difference between anxiously protecting my child because he is mine and having a profound active care for all children, for all of human suffering. Will you do this? That is the real question, isn't it? We can talk about this everlastingly as humans have done for millennia. We can analyze it, put it into different words, write books, and give lectures. But when it comes to the actual testing of it, the acting upon it, we don't seem to want to do it. Why is that? We prefer to go on as we are, clinging to the status quo, perhaps modifying it slightly here and there, a little self-improvement, a new relationship, a new political party, but we want to carry on. We prefer our quarrels, our jealousies, our ambitions, our tribalism, because as painful as it is what we know. The me is attached to its own suffering because that suffering is its identity. To be free from attachment feels like an annihilation, like death. And the me is terrified of that emptiness, of that vast unknown. It would rather be a somebody in a prison of pain than a nobody in total freedom. And the deepest attachment of all, the very bedrock of the me, is the attachment to our own experience, to our own knowledge, to our own accumulated perception. To be free of that, what does it even mean? The me is the known. It is the bundle of memories, the scar tissue of past hurts, the residue of past pleasures. This accumulation is what we call I. This is what we use to navigate the world. Our knowledge, our experience is a filter, a screen of the past through which we interpret and therefore distort the living present. We meet a new person, but we don't see them. We see them through the image of someone else from our past whom they resemble. We see them through our categories, this kind of person, that political party, this race. We never actually meet. We look at a flower and we instantly say rose, and that very naming, that act of recognition from memory, has prevented us from seeing the flower in its newness, in its vulnerability, in its astonishing color. So, to be free of the self means to be free of the known. It means to die to yesterday, to die to everything you have accumulated, so that your mind is fresh, young, and innocent, and can therefore see what is true. And this freedom, you see, does not take time. That is one of our greatest, most comforting excuses. That we must have time to be free, that it is a gradual process of evolution, of slow improvement. That is just the me projecting a future for itself in which it will be free, which is a continuation of itself. But freedom is not in the future. It is not an achievement. When you see a poisonous snake in your room, you don't say, I will gradually get rid of it. You act instantly. The seeing is the acting. In the same way, when you see with your whole being, not just intellectually, the truth of attachment, what it does in the world, what it does in your relationships, the division, the separation, the ugliness, the sorrow, when you see the actual total truth of it, then that very perception is the ending of it. Your own perception, your own total insight sets you free. The question is not how or when. The question is, will you do it